Welcome, everyone, to Mark Out Radio. I'm Sean.
And I'm Dana.
And we are fresh off of our Barbara Bain private signing that we've been talking about for a few months. So I guess let's just recap how we got into this deal with Barbara Bain now that it's over. Because it is kind of an interesting story, I think. So honestly, Dana, if we can be totally truthful, prior to us hashing out this deal and talking about this deal, what was your opinion of and or knowledge about Barbara Bain?
My knowledge was pretty much non-existent. I was aware of the shows that she was in, but they were just, several decades before my, I really haven't rewatched or revisited any, shows from that era. Yeah.
Several decades before your birth?
Yeah. So I knew of her franchises. I just didn't really know her by name. So I really didn't know very much prior to our deal. How about you?
Same. I had never seen either Mission Impossible or Space 1999. And so just for a little bit of backstory, we had done a deal involving someone. There was someone, a gentleman by the name of Bob. He was involved in the deal with Olivia Hussey from 2022, which we still have to do a full show about. I'm just building up to it. It honestly, reliving the trauma of the Olivia Hussey booking is going to take a while before I'm comfortable talking about it. But I know, in all seriousness, so we developed a pretty good relationship with Bob, and so Bob was interested in bringing Barbara Bain to Chiller, and he wanted to know more or less if we wanted to be part of structuring that deal to bringing her in. And so again, he told me the name, and I was like, I don't know who this is. I don't really know this show. And so we did a little bit of digging, and initially you didn't want to even be a part of it.
I didn't. I was out. I was initially out, because my argument was I'm not really aware of her as an actual person, not just as someone in these shows I've heard of. And it was, a decent amount of money on something I wasn't super aware of. But then my research showed, and a bit of FOMO, I felt like it was too good of an opportunity to pass up.
Yeah, so we basically that's the short version of it, and we made that deal happen. And it's funny because we've joked kinda over the past few, I guess it was the past few months now, about Barbara being 93 years old. She had just recently turned 93, and sorry, I gotta pause for a sec. All right, I'll redo it again. Where did I leave off?
We joked about her being 93 years old.
Okay, so we had joked about So we had joked about Barbara being 93 years old, and she had just recently turned 93, and that's part of the appeal or the interest in this. But anytime you're working with someone who is older, there is always the possibility for having unreasonable demands. I mean, or even just their general health and welfare. It's important to have confidence in the talent you're working with, especially after, again, I don't want to give too much of a tease, but working with Olivia Hussey was a little bit of a challenge in this regard. So, we were nervous about things like, is she going to be okay on the flight? It's a long flight across the country. Is she going to get here and is she going to be super cooperative? What's the general tenor of the signing going to be like? Is she going to be happy? Is she going to be grumpy? Is she going to be too tired? Is she going to pay attention to our pen changes and our personalization requests and our placement requests and all the insane things that we care about that we care about doing when it comes to signings? Sometimes people don't want to do. So we were pretty nervous going into this.
Absolutely, because when you look at the things that you need to stick to make a signing successful, that's sort of the downside of working with a talent that doesn't do a lot of these. It's a great investment opportunity. It's a great opportunity in general, because the market is not flooded with merchandise from this person. But at the same time, they're not used to the demands of a signing. You don't know, by looking at other people's successes with them, how well they're going to follow directions and take suggestions and things like that. So I was definitely nervous about how she was going to, perform.
And and the end result was that Barbara was awesome. She was hilarious. So she took a particular liking to you, which was kind of, I mean, you dropped the teacher bomb. It's actually a very slick move, if I'm being honest,
Yeah.
to drop a teacher bomb um on a guest, because they do feel sort of a social obligation to be nice at that point. But I didn't get the impression that she was doing that out of a social nicety. I think she's generally a pretty funny, pretty quick-witted person.
Oh yeah, she was absolutely full of life. Not to go keep back to that episode that we're teasing, but Olivia was 20 years younger, and this woman had like 6 times as much life. She was a extremely youthful, quick-witted 93, and it turns out, had I known more about her history, this would have seemed a lot more calculated than it was, since I didn't know much about her history. She apparently started like some reading program decades ago with kids and different, like with the Screen Actors Guild. So she took the teacher card was apparently very big with her. She said if she wasn't an actress, she would have become a teacher. So we hit it off quick, and it made it's always good. A signing always goes quicker and smoother if you have a good rapport with the talent and you're able to have a conversation away from just directions, and it just makes everything feel lighter.
I think the most interesting thing about her, because in a lot of ways she is the exact opposite of someone like an Olivia Hussey. I mean, and they are actually from different generations, right? Hussey was born in the 50s and Barbara was born in the 30s.
Yeah.
But Barbara was very much, because you had cracked a couple of jokes about her position in society as opposed to yours, right? You
Yes.
had made them like, no one wants my autograph, and those kind of jokes. And she made very clear multiple times that she kind of finds the whole idea of people wanting to meet her or people wanting her autograph kind of farcical, for lack of a better word, kind of silly, that she viewed herself as a regular person who more or
Yeah.
less just has had lots and lots and lots and lots of pictures taken of her. And so a lot of the signing was spent about her looking at the photos we had and going, I don't even remember this one, or where was this one taken, or wow, like she was sort of remarking at the fact that her, and almost like she was kind of reflecting on the fact that so much of her life was spent in front of a camera, and she doesn't even really recall all of those moments. But let me tell you, she had a lot of recall about very specific things. Like, she remembered all kinds of stuff that was happening in the 40s and 50s, and she was telling all kinds of stories.
Oh yeah. She had a lot of great stories. It was very insightful.
It was really interesting. And so we got all our stuff taken care of. And I have to say, we also we made the decision, and we got a deal worked out at the last minute to have JSA witness there for our signing with Barbara, and we had Nick from JSA do the witnessing. What are your? I have to say, I was so thoroughly impressed with and thankful for Nick's professionalism and help with that signing. I mean, it's one of those things where the authenticator can either be I've never had an authenticator be a negative presence, but they can either be a neutral presence or a positive presence. And Nick was such a positive presence that I feel like we have to shout him out.
Oh yeah, that was absolutely invaluable having him there. Like, on a product level, I'm just so happy that we're able to bring like the witness like stickers and cards to people on these items, because we've discussed that there's certain people are less trustworthy of an authentication sticker than others, but I think everyone can agree that the witness stickers are pretty damn that's hard to beat. And
Yeah.
as far as having another set of hands, just knowledge, and just it's a nice personality in the room, he was great. It was absolutely awesome all around.
Total positive energy, really helped arrange the items and make sure there was no ink rubbing, and really took care to maintain the condition of the items, because that's something that I'm saying we, but I'm a total nut when it comes to the condition of items. I really need them to be flawless in terms of their condition, and he really helped with that. he really helped organize the items so they were perfect condition and maintain that condition. So it really couldn't have gone any better than it did. I
No.
don't think, we have amazing items that are going to be up soon. This is like, it's funny because we thought we were going to just be talking about, the experience, but this sounds like a sales pitch now. But honestly, the items came out so cool. It came out cooler. The whole experience was cooler than I thought it was. I thought it was going to be, good, but it was actually super cool. And I had mentioned that I had kind of an adrenaline high after it was over.
You did.
Which does not always happen with these signings. So sometimes you're exhausted and they're miserable.
But just the last thing about the JSA rep, I couldn't believe when I was done, passing items to Barbara. Sorry, I could not believe when I turned around, everything was stickered. Everything was everything was ready to go. I thought, all right, now we got to do the stickering, but that was done. He was a machine.
We were in and out of there within 30 minutes, the whole thing bell to bell, which is, ideal, honestly.
Yeah.
So that it was phenomenal. So, so if you're interested, let's just segue in. If you're interested in buying, checking out some of these Barbara Bain items or any of the items that we talk about or any of our autographed items, check out www.markedoutcollectibles.com. Or they'll also be on our eBay store, Marked Out Collectibles. To reach out to us for any questions or to give feedback about the show, please email markedoutcollectibles@gmail.com or join the Marked Out Collectibles official marketplace on Facebook, and you can leave comments and questions there. And all links to all of our socials are on our Facebook posts and in the notes on Substack. So, speaking of comments and interaction, we actually had an interesting comment on YouTube from someone named Charles Kim. It's always super exciting. I love getting comments and feedback from people I know or people I've interacted with at cons over the years. But I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of an interesting experience to get comments and feedback from people I don't know. If that makes sense, because it's showing a little bit of reach from this show. So let me just read this comment because it's really interesting and it speaks to exactly what we were talking about last week on the show. So Charles said, I was also in the Denise Richards line at 3 p.m. on Thursday, but I left after she left the table. I rejoined the line a bit later, and one of the volunteers walked down the line asking if anyone had a 4-day pass. If they did, like I did, he gave us an M sticker for ADA access. I don't know why. I'm like you. I hate people who take advantage of the ADA loophole, but I'm not going to lie. I use the sticker during the weekend and it saves me hours of waiting. I'm not going to lie to get an ADA sticker next year because this feels scummy, but I'm thankful I had it this year. And so this is actually, I didn't know this was happening. So apparently I was pretty much near this guy on the line. For the 3 p.m. I was towards the back of the line at the 3 p.m. For the 3 p.m. session. So I guess the line handler guy, who I actually had mentioned the poor guy last week as being unequipped to handle this line, and I guess this information only reinforces that point. But I guess as an attempt at a line skip or an attempt at a make good to the fans near the front of that line who missed out on Denise Richards because she cut and run from her session, he just was giving out ADA stickers willy-nilly. I
feel like there was definitely a better way of doing that, but I guess that's certainly a way.
It's certainly a way to do it. It just speaks to the absurdity, and we've talked about this a little, and it's coming to be a lot. And honestly, it was a hot topic of conversation among lots of the people who I interacted with at NYCC. But the ADA sticker and the ADA designation is a hot topic nowadays because it really is hard to figure out what exactly it means. Here you have someone who, by his own admission, is not disabled at all, and he was given an ADA sticker as a means of line jumping by a volunteer at the show. And look, I understand why they did it, right? This poor guy waited in line. He got shafted by the talent. You want some mechanism for him to be able to jump the line in the future, and it'll probably be a different volunteer next time he's doing that session, so it's not like the volunteer knows his face. So this is a way to kind of as a make good for this guy. So what do you think about that?
I mean, I guess the ends justify the means, but if you're trying to not have something abused, I think it's probably good on an organizational level. And I use organizational loosely when you have a volunteer who isn't even a paid part of the organization, but still, when you're wearing the logo and you're just giving them out as a way to cut the line faster, or even get your rightful place in line, like that, to me, just kind of makes it seem more acceptable to just use that as a line jump rather than what it should be used for.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild, it's one of those things that I mean, I have heard this saying used a lot, and my dad told me this when I was a little kid, and as I get older, I understand it more. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? And how it's obviously a good thing to want to help out people who have a hard time standing in line, or can't really stand for long periods of time, or for other reasons need to be moved along more quickly because maybe they take up more space if they have a wheelchair, or if they have a baby stroller even, or things like that. I understand there's a very logical reason for doing this, right? But at
Yeah.
the same time, if you don't think through the full implications of it, then you end up with something like this situation that we're in now. And I do believe, and we've had this argument, you and I, that this is an unsustainable situation, and they will change these policies sooner rather than later, as more people realize that this sticker doesn't really mean anything, but it provides enormous benefits.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, and I don't want to make this an ADA episode, but I don't entirely understand or really see how they can really change it. Because like you can't, like, you don't have to, someone doesn't have to rip off their pant leg and show the scar, or show documentation of the whatever they're dealing with. So I don't entirely know how you can sort of prevent abuse while still providing what you're sort of obligated to provide at a show like this.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have the answer to that, and I don't run cons. And this is, thankfully I don't run cons, and I understand that, look, one of the elephants in the room here, and again, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole entirely, but cons attract a disproportionately high number of people with disabilities. And I think part of the reason for that is, cons are focused on activities that are very accessible to people with disabilities. Movies, various fandoms, they're very accessible. They're very inviting to people with various disabilities. And so they're often represented at a rate higher than the general population at cons. And so something has to be done to protect their health and safety. I agree with you. And it's hard for these cons to navigate exactly what that looks like, and their policies are starting to come apart at the seams, I guess, is the right way of putting it. And I'm not sure that we have the answer. We don't have the answer here. I would love to hear what people have to say about this generally, because I mean, we've talked this to death in the car. I've talked about this to death in the line at various cons, when you see people being abusive, when we were joking about my own cousin being abusive, or honestly, there have been instances where I thought that there was an instance I had, and I didn't share this with you, where someone who did have a pretty significant disability, who had a hard time with mobility, didn't even realize that such a sticker was available. And they were behind me in one of the lines, and I was trying to help one of their family members figure out how to get that sticker because they were having a really, really hard time. And so in that case, it's like, no, this person didn't even know those accommodations are available. And the con should be, I don't know how they can, but should be more forthcoming about helping people who genuinely have mobility issues, or issues with being standing in large crowds, to help them out. Because even from a purely legit, forget about the feelings of it, forgetting about the empathetic aspect of it, but it helps everything run more smoothly when people who have a hard time moving around are moved in a more expeditious way, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's just true. It helps, when someone has a big motorized wheelchair, not for nothing, it takes up space, and it's hard to move around, and it's hard to make turns, and those kind of, it takes up extra, width in the aisle. And so those little things that, I mean, to that person, they're not little things, they're major things. But those little things that, I, as someone who doesn't need a wheelchair, don't think about too often, it helps the overall flow of the show if those people with those needs are provided additional services. Again, the problem is when it's very ill defined what entitles you to those services. And so it's just an interesting thing that even the volunteers for the con were being abusive of this system. That's the interesting part. And so thank you so much for the comment, Charles. And again, if anyone has additional information about this or wants to sound off on this or anything else, definitely reach out on Facebook or YouTube or shoot us an email, and we're more than happy to go into this because I know when talking to people at cons about this stuff, it definitely fires them up.
It's a big topic.
I've had lots of heated conversations with people about it, and for all kinds of opinions, all kinds of perspectives. So look forward to it. So please reach out. I love these kind of conversations are a blast. So back to Barbara. The whole premise, I shouldn't say the premise, the context for bringing Barbara in or our having the signing was that Barbara was going to be signing for Chiller Theater. And so even though our signing with Barbara took place well before Chiller Theater, we decided to hang out for Chiller for the day. Now, I had a very different day than you planned. And I mean, to be fair, though, a lot of that difference stems from the fact that the headliner of the show dropped off a week earlier.
Oh, yeah. That'll change things at any show.
So let's just talk about it. Let's rip the Band-Aid off and talk about it. And I know it's a hard thing to talk about. And I know there's been a lot of social media fury about this and a lot of controversy about it. And, I think that when dealing with situations like the Mickey Rourke situation, I think it's important to deal openly and transparently about it, not necessarily to name call and blame and, make fun of, as some people like to do, or get angry, but to really examine why this business is so bizarre and so interesting, and why this situation happened. Because I think they're about, in my opinion, and I know we're not exactly lined up with our opinions on this. There's a little bit of difference. In my opinion, there were like 10 different steps along the way where this situation could have and should have been avoided. But there are significant incentives for people not to heed those kinds of warnings and to allow the situation to progress the way that it did. So how about that? So I guess we'll give the basic background as to what happened, and then we'll talk about it. So Mickey Rourke was announced as the headliner to the Chiller Theater show. He was being brought in by Big Event New York. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, we do a decent amount of business personally and professionally with Big Event New York. I would say, you more than I, but I as well am pretty friendly with the owner of Big Event New York. We greet each other at shows. We know each other by face, and we don't have to even use names or whatever. I don't know if he's comfortable with that, but
he's a great guy.
Yeah, and so we know him for a long time. We do a lot of business with him. He's a very honest and very straight shooter. And he's also someone who brings in headline level guests to Chiller Theater all the time. He's responsible for their headliners now. And, that's an interesting departure from how Chiller Theater used to work in the past. So Chiller Theater, the way it typically had worked, would be the con itself would bring in the guests, and they would have someone handling certain guests, and the people who are handling the guests would take a cut of the guests' revenue. But by and large, the con brokered the appearances. What Big Event New York does that's a little bit different from the other guests is that they pay, for lack of a better term, they pay appearance fees for their guests, as opposed to brokering like split revenue deals, which is how most guests come in. So I'm not going to say all, because there are other individual deals, and I'm not even sure that all of Big Event New York's deals work out this way. But most guests who come into Chiller Theater come in on a split revenue deal where they have a handler who takes 10% or so, give or take, of the overall revenue for the week, and in exchange for that, the handler takes care of the travel and the bookings and the meals and the hotel and stuff like that. That's generally how it goes. And then Chiller Theater gets to advertise that guest on the website and hopefully generate ticket sales based on that person's name. Big Event New York does it a little bit differently. And for some of their guests, they pay an appearance fee, a cash fee, usually up front, but it depends. And then they keep the money generated by the guest Sometimes there's a small revenue share in there as well. And that honestly allows Big Event to bring in guests who typically wouldn't come to these shows, because a lot of these guests are a little bit skittish about working on a revenue sharing deal because they may not make a ton of money. And so they prefer the method of being paid a static appearance fee, which gives them the stability of knowing how much money exactly they're working for. How'd I do so far?
So far, so good.
So Mickey Rourke was announced as a headliner for Chiller, and the structure of his deal was not made public. Little snippets of it were on Facebook, which I think that probably not the best idea as well, but it happened. And let's just start with today. What was the initial response online when Mickey Rourke was announced?
By the general, I would say the more common fan and collector who probably don't know his history, there was just overall excitement from people a little deeper in the trenches that have experienced different scandals, let's just say, involving him and like different promoters and things over the years. There was probably a great deal of skepticism, I think is a fair word to use.
Yeah, I mean, let's just be open with it. The skepticism comes from the fact that Mickey Rourke has been booked for events before.
Yeah.
And his reputation is that he either doesn't show up, or he holds people up for more money, or he tries to change the terms of the appearance at the last minute to make them so undesirable that they're forced to cancel the appearance. And those are kind of what he's done in the past. I mean, there's kind of an infamous story, and I'm going to be honest, I don't even know if the full details are true, but I've heard it so many times from so many different people that it's almost become like an apocryphal like Bible story or something like that. So I'm going to roll with it. But as the story goes, Mickey Rourke was booked for a private signing that was supposed to take place at a location either at or near his home. The people who were running the private signing showed up with money and items in hand, only to be not allowed inside. Have you heard that story?
I have.
And so, I don't know who it was. I don't know the exact details. I don't know if I'm missing that, but that's the story people tell to give you an idea of how eccentric Mickey Rourke is to deal with. He's just an eccentric, and I don't know why. I'm not going to even presume to understand anything about, why people do the things that they do. But that's the story that if you're a con person, you've heard these Mickey Rourke stories, that he just doesn't do business. He's a pain in the neck. He's people's impossible to work with. So when people like us, when we see Big Event announcing Mickey Rourke, our eyebrows get raised. Number one, because Big Event has an excellent reputation as far as getting people to appear, especially people who don't necessarily do a ton of cons, and they have gotten people to appear as like many people who've never done cons before.
Absolutely.
And so they're good at that. And so when Big Event announces someone, this is not someone with no reputation or a negative reputation, and there are people who have negative reputations, tons of them around here. If it was a negative person or person with a negative reputation who announced Mickey Rourke, I think people would have been a lot more skeptical. But because it was Big Event, people were like, "Oh, damn,
yeah,
this is going to happen." And then there was something else that made people believe even more that it was going to happen. Not only did they book him, they got him to record an appearance hype video. Did you watch it?
I did.
What'd you think of it?
I thought he looked pretty bad, but I mean, that's to be expected, I suppose. He didn't look good, but I was personally, when I said skepticism on my end, my skepticism was entirely on Mickey Rourke. I told anyone that I discussed about this privately, I said, if anyone is getting him to this show, it's Big Event. And I would have lost some money on bets because I was actually telling people he will be here. That was my feeling. I just felt like the numbers were going to be right, and he was going to get on that plane because Big Event manages to get that done in most cases. But I mean, Mickey Rourke is a special kind of guy, I guess.
So yeah, the hype video, I mean, I thought it was weird. And actually, again, in retrospect, someone should have looked at that hype video and probably raised more red flags than they did.
That's
because of the overall condition of what he's in. But you know what? There are plenty of people from who've been in movies in the past who come to these cons, and you look at them and you speak to them and you go, "Ooh, boy, that was an interesting experience." So I guess on some level, it's easy to go into these situations with rose-colored glasses, especially if you've come to an agreement on the deal. And so a couple days ago, I mean, it was really just a couple of days ago, Mickey Rourke was canceled from the show unceremoniously, I guess, shall we say. He was just, it said canceled on the website, and people went nuts because there were a lot of people who bought tickets to Chiller, because of Mickey Rourke. I mean, he's a very rare. He's never done a con, I don't think. He's in demand, especially with these kind of crowd. He's been in a lot of things, and I'm not going to say an A-lister. I know we have different definitions of that, but he's certainly a very recognizable name. And there was tremendous backlash. But the part that is interesting to me, and the part that I want to get your opinion about, is what happened next. So the official Chiller Theater Facebook page posted a message saying Mickey Rourke was canceled, and then said something to the effect of, "Don't blame us, blame the people who brought him in." Basically throwing 100% of the blame on Big Event New York. And that inspired a huge fight in the comments of that post. And that post was deleted within, I think, 30 or 40 minutes. But I mean, I happened to see it, and so I read the whole thing. And it was deleted while I was reading the comments. So within 30 or 40 minutes of its being posted. So, I mean, what do you think about that? Who bears the responsibility for a situation where you have a con advertising a talent that was being brought in by a third party?
I think you have to give to some level a share in the blame. I thought as far as like what actually happened, how it transpired, I think Big Event handled it perfectly. They handled it as transparently as possible. I thought Chiller making that post was honestly surprising, confusing, inappropriate. They sold tickets on Mickey Rourke's name. They profited from Mickey Rourke being there, which maybe they're going to say that because of that now they're in a bad spot but they approved Mickey Rourke as a guest. They allowed this to happen. They profited. Big Event, anything they got, they refunded. It's, I don't really see how you could act holier than thou when you're at this point the only people that still have money in your pocket from this Mickey Rourke failed booking.
I mean, it's interesting because there are those of us, and you and I had this conversation, should Big Event have booked Mickey Rourke to begin with? What caution should agent? I mean, it's hard to even classify what Big Event is in this case. You can call them a vendor or an agent in this capacity, but it's tricky because there's probably not a good term for it. They were the handler of sorts. They were the booker. I see. I'm stumbling over all these words. It's kind of like a mix of all these things. But when you know that someone has the reputation of being someone who doesn't show up, doesn't adhere to their own promises, doesn't do what they say they're going to do, don't you hesitate a little before booking them?
Well, here's the thing. I'm squeamish. I would absolutely never have had the nerve to take a swing as large as this. But I'm not Big Event. There's a reason that we've booked the talent we've booked, and they've booked the talent they've booked. In part, I think it's having a strong stomach and an ability to take big risks. As a collector, I appreciate someone taking this risk because I think maybe Mickey Rourke is to a level previously uncharted, but there's been a number of people. At one point, Katie Seagal seemed untouchable, and
she was blacklisted. There's some people. There are certain names that have been historically blacklisted from cons because they've screwed over promoters. Katie Seagal was one. Randy Quaid was another. Corey Feldman was another.
Yeah.
All those three historically had been blacklisted by major cons and are now on the con circuit because they've rehabilitated their reputations.
Yeah. So if every vendor was as squeamish as me, we would never see any of those people. So you need people like Big Event to be able to look at history and say, this is going to be different. And, I don't know details of the deal. I hope Big Event protected themselves. I don't know. I won't share any speculation or anything like that, but I appreciate the effort.
I just think that there is a certain amount of frustration among fans when someone gets booked. There was a confidence to big events booking where they do the booking, then they have the hype video. They were clearly strutting their stuff in public, and there's a certain amount of, haha, we got them and you guys were never able to kind of. I'm not saying they were saying those things directly, but there's a certain amount of vibe that posting a hype video gives off, because they were able to do what others had not been able to do, right? So and there was a lot of, oh damn, look at them, that's what a great success. And then their announcement, and this is the problem that I have with the way they handled it, and they did mostly handle it right, but when they posted the cancellation announcement, people they said he was unwilling to adhere to the terms he had originally agreed with. That was more or less the language that they used. And then when people asked that, because that's a statement that could mean literally anything. And so then there was the question of, well, what exactly does that mean, right? What exactly do you mean by that? And then what they said, and I don't know if these posts have been deleted, but I read them, so I read them firsthand. So this is not me, speculating. I read this. So someone from Big Event posted this. They said that he decided when he got to Big Event, when he got to Chiller, he was going to only sign one pre-approved image, that he wouldn't sign any fan items, and that he wouldn't take any photos at all, and not professional photo ops, and not items at the table. And they thought that.
Also, he was only going to sign for 6 hours. So I actually have the screenshot in front of me. Everything else you said is spot on, but he was only going to appear at the convention for 6 hours.
And then 6 hours is way less than, would take to make any money on him.
Absolutely.
And and they were sort of like, they did the surprised Pikachu face when Mickey Rourke tried to alter the terms of their deal. But I have a problem with that. And the problem I have with that is, why are you making a surprised Pikachu face when Mickey Rourke is altering the terms of the deal you agreed to? And this is what he does. This is his reputation. He agrees to things and then changes them. And so it's kind of like being, not to throw this in wrestling terms, but it's kind of like being surprised when you book Abdullah the Butcher and he wants to charge you an extra $5, or charge your customers an extra $5 in his pocket to stab them in the head with a fork. That's what Abby always did. Right. And that's something that, if you ask the right questions, and you talk to the right people, and you go into deals with your eyes open, this, right? You cannot say, and I really mean this, you cannot say, oh, it's not our fault that Mickey didn't abide by the terms we agreed to. When this is his reputation, this is what he does. He is an unstable person who makes unreasonable demands. This is the thing that was going to happen. Or could have been reasonably foreseen to happen. And so there does lie some blame there. You can't be surprised. The announcement should have said, listen, we tried to structure the deal so that he couldn't weasel out of it, but guess what? He tried anyway. And so we tried to do this. We knew it was a risk, and we failed. I would have respect for that kind of announcement. Instead, it was more like, oh, he's just unreasonable. So, you know what? Yes, we knew that already. We knew he was unreasonable. And I don't know. I think it's just a little bit of a cop out, I think, to not take that responsibility. That being said, a bigger cop out came from Chiller, a much bigger, because Chiller could have said, and this is, you got to understand, anyone who knows it, if a vendor or an agent or whatever is booking a guest for a con, that guest must be approved by the person who runs the con in order for it to. It's not like if I had a vendor table at Chiller or whatever, I could just bring in whoever I want. The con has right of refusal over any guest who I bring in. And there have been plenty of cases we've heard where someone tries to bring in a guest to a con, and for whatever reason, the con vetoes that request because they either planned to have that guest at a future show, or had a hard time with that guest in the past, or recently booked that guest too many times and don't think they're right for this. There's so many reasons why, legitimate, fair reasons, why a con would reject a guest. And so Chiller Theater, 100%, knowing Mickey Rourke's reputation, knowing what he's done to people in the past, they approved that booking. And as you said before, they sold tickets on the back of that booking. And so for them to throw up their hands and say, "Oh, it's Big Event's fault," is dishonest. It's absolutely dishonest. Yes, Big Event handled the booking, but Chiller 100% approved the booking, advertised the booking, and sold tickets based on that booking. And I think it's such a an irresponsible cop out. And I guess I understand why people do what they do, right? As we said in other episodes, and as is true in life, it is hard to take responsibility when you make a mistake, right? It's an easy thing to do to pass the blame onto someone else. And
Sure.
obviously, and keep in mind, the lion's share of the blame, we're quibbling here about blame sharing, but the lion's share of the blame falls on Mickey Rourke for being, a lying, difficult person to work with who doesn't adhere to the things he agrees to. And I think that goes without saying, so we'll say it. Mickey Rourke does bear the brunt of the blame for this.
Oh,
That being said, a little bit of honesty and a little bit of transparency in this hobby would go a really, really long way. But I understand why they don't do that, because if they were to say out loud, "Oh, well, Mickey Rourke is difficult, and we took a big swing and we hoped, but it didn't work out." In their eyes, that would mean they were diminishing or belittling a guest, which might make it more difficult the guests in the future might think that the con would be willing to throw them under the bus. And so in the con's perception, they have to be as politically neutral as they possibly can be.
Yeah. This is, I think, where we differ slightly. I'm like, as you were talking about this, I'm actually rereading the official statement. I think the official statement is fine. Like, yeah, they could have used the buzzwords of "we knew it was a risk," but I mean, I don't want to seem cold. I understand that people bought tickets and maybe they're disappointed. There was one guy who alluded to like getting a tattoo of Mickey Rourke and then leaving space for the signature. And then he was disappointed.
He didn't allude to it. He stated that directly. He took a picture. He sent a picture of it.
Oh, I didn't see the picture. Well, listen.
Yeah.
That guy's a moron. Like, I'm sorry. Like, that's just stupid. Like, I'm not putting blame on Chiller, Big Event, or Mickey Rourke. If you choose to get a tattoo of a guy who's a notorious flake and if you're going to get a tattoo of someone, do your research before you do that. That's just ridiculous. I think Big Event's statement was fine. I think they actually were very transparent as far as saying what he was expecting as he changed the deal. Maybe I'll come across as cold, but I mean, all these events have cards subject to change for a reason. If you buy a $40 ticket, you have to know if you're coming for one person. I don't care who it is. That can change. You should have read something in a comment at some point when this was announced that you would know that this was risky. I appreciate the risk. I don't appreciate Chiller throwing Big Event under the bus. I don't think anyone's free of blame. I think when something like this blows up in your face, you all have some blame, deserved or undeserved. But Chiller trying to get away from all the blame is just a very bad look. Big Event, I feel, kind of owned disappointment. Mickey Rourke owns nothing because he's a psychopath. And Chiller, I feel, just looked horrible.
I don't know. I mean, I have a hard time with... I have a hard time with cards subject to change, because anytime you have a disclaimer like that, and I remember when we talked about this once before, but when Wizard World was advertising Willem Dafoe, right? And it's like, when you advertise someone that big, I think and Mickey Rourke in the world of Chiller is that big. It's a big get. People believe, truthfully, that you did your due diligence and you have that person locked in. And the average person, look, one of the reasons why we're running this podcast is to try and help the average person understand that there's no such thing as locked in, that these cons truly are at the mercy of these guests. And a lot of the vendors and a lot of the dealers and a lot of the con promoters, they like to try and come across when everything is running well. They like to come across as being totally in control and totally, the orchestrators, the maestros of these events. When things go badly, they're very, very quick to throw their hands up and say cards subject to change. And I have a problem with that. If you advertise someone who's a big, 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 big name, and that big, 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 big name drops off a week before, that's a problem. It's a problem. It was a problem when Wizard did it with Willem Dafoe. show, because it's one thing if a small guest. Now I understand, right? There is always a circumstance where something happens, and if a smaller name guest dropped off a show, it is nothing they could really do. But I remember when, there have been instances like with other cons, when big name guests, when headline level guests drop off a show, they scramble for another headliner, because let's face it, certain guests draw and other guests don't. And, we haven't even really talked about the con itself yet, but we can use that as a segue into the con, because as we saw yesterday, certain guests drew big lines and other guests had nobody. So this is a perfect segue to talk about that. So, I mean, let's talk about the big drawing guests. Now, to be fair, we were in such a small portion of the show, there could have been lines for other guests we didn't even see.
Quite fair.
Because I have some of these guests, I have no idea whether they're lines or not. But we did experience one big line. That was the Corey Feldman line. So actually, you didn't even experience it. I did. I held your spot.
Yes, you were kind and also helpful of yourself enough to do that, because you saved hours off of our original timeline.
Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, forget it. It would have been a nightmare to stay that long. So I stayed in the Corey Feldman line while you knocked out the other people from the Ninja Turtles movie. How were those lines?
Let's see. The guy who played Leonardo, Brian Tochi, I think that's how you pronounce his last name. He had a consistent line, because I was looking at his banner. To be perfectly honest, I was unaware of his other credits, but he apparently had other credits, Revenge of the Nerds and different things, although the majority of his line had Ninja Turtle stuff. So he had a solid line. He was a 40-40-60 for the combo. He had some upcharges on figures and Funkos, but most people had posters and, prints and different things. He was very nice. Line was, 8-9 people, but he took his time with everyone, so it took a little bit of time. Then there was Robbie Rist, I believe is how it's pronounced. He played Michelangelo in the Turtle movies. He surprisingly, at the same price, had a significantly smaller line, which I don't understand, because wouldn't the person that got Leonardo also want Michelangelo on the same item? Perhaps I just got in the room. Maybe everyone was on his line first, and then they all just sort of moved over there. It's possible. Sometimes lines are like, it would be smart for half the line to say, let me go do this guy first, since he has no line, and kind of split off. But sometimes people move like cyborgs and they don't really like have that, intuition, and they just stand in one spot and don't do the logical thing. So I don't know. But those lines were pretty healthy. Ernie Reyes, who I thought I was going to get, I ended up not getting him again, because I don't have a Turtles 2 poster. I have a Turtles 1 print.
You've passed on him like 3 times, right?
I know. He's becoming like Robert Patrick. I was close to getting him yesterday, and honestly, I kind of planned on it after we got the Corey, and then I just forgot. But yeah, I didn't get him. He was doing almost very little business. Photo here, photo there, not much. And the James Saito, who played Shredder in the first movie, he decided to make himself. He had he legit needed an entire sheet of paper to explain his pricing. And he was premium pricing for your item, whether your item was a ply of toilet paper or like a jewel encrusted Shredder mask. It was all the same. If it's your item, he was charging more. He was $80 combo instead of a $60 combo. And let me tell you, he had a significantly less amount of business. He even did, from what I saw, he did less business than Ernie. He probably made more money because his price was higher, but he did less business than even Ernie. So I'm not so sure if that extra $20 was smart. He may have done better business being 60 like the other Turtles, but all were nice. I got them all on my 11x14 print. I didn't get Corey on the print because he's just, we'll get into Corey in a few moments, but he's just
get into it. Just get into it.
Let's get into it. Yeah. So you held the line for me. As you were about to enter the room, we saw a swarm of cops. You tipped me off before I saw them walk in the room that the police were coming. And you said you heard Corey Feldman's name over the radio. So, I'm not going to disparage the man, but, my mind went several places. I'm like, oh, great. What did Corey do?
Mine as well.
Yeah. So I tried to think positive. I'm like, all right, these guys just want photo ops. Because, if I was a cop, I would be running around the show like a lunatic getting photo ops too. So, hopefully it's that. It wasn't that. I saw a man that apparently works for Chiller that I thought was Mark Burnham. It looks a hell of a lot like Mark Burnham, but it's not Mark Burnham. I was hoping that Mr. Burnham hadn't fallen so far from Leatherface that he was now working for Chiller. Luckily, he's not. But he was in there dealing with some stuff, and it appeared, and we don't have all the details, but there was apparently some degree of can't really say shoplifting, since this is not really a shop, but sort of. Some convention goer, it seemed, from what I was eavesdropping and what I was able to hear and ascertain, I believe he somehow swindled a stack of signed 8x10s. That's what I thought I heard them say, which I don't really understand because I've never seen just a stack of signed 8x10s laying around. Where would you find a stack of signed 8x10s? It doesn't make sense. But apparently he did. The guy that looked like Mark Burnham, who worked for the show, sort of kept him there until police came. Police sat him down in a chair. It was funny watching the guy.
He looked very sweaty sitting there.
Oh yeah, he was sweaty. He was sweating. He was sitting in the chair. I knew it was bad for him when he started showing the cops his empty lanyard. Like, he was showing them, he was holding it up and like showing them the clasp where like the badge would go. Like, I don't know what he was trying to say, that he had a license to steal and he lost it. Like, I don't know what is an empty lanyard or even a full lanyard going to do to like help this?
Well, I mean, to be fair, we didn't hear what he was saying, so I have no idea.
Yeah, maybe he had some. If the lanyard doesn't fit, you must have quit. Level defense. I don't know, but it didn't look good. They slapped the cuffs on him. I, of course, snapped a photo of it because, I mean, listen, we need graphics for this episode. So if you want to see the Chiller guy getting arrested, check out our graphic for this episode. It's there. So they took him away in cuffs. A couple of the cops, got some photos, but somehow Brian Tochi ended up over there, and he was taking care of the cops since they were in there working. He gave them some free photos, which was very nice. They left. Corey Feldman, after that, went for a break. Either that or he went to flush some stuff because he was afraid of the police being that close. Who knows? But Corey Feldman left the room. You wanted me to get, this is where I started losing my marbles a little bit. You said to me, go get Jameson, the other Frog brother, correct?
I was very adamant. I wanted to get out of there. It was just getting late.
I was afraid because it's Corey Feldman. I said, what if he leaves? What if he doesn't come back until pro photos? I go spend $50 now on Jameson, and then I got to get a pro photo. If I have to get a pro photo with Corey, I might as well get the dual photo. So the $50 would be wasted. So I couldn't do it. I stood in the line. I watched Jameson just sit there. Once Corey came back from his break, which, true to his word, they said a 15-minute break. That's what he took. He got back in the room. I tagged you back in. I went and got Jameson. He was a guy, since Corey is a madman with autographs, I left my little print of the Lost Boys home. And as much as I love the Frog Brothers, I didn't get an autograph. Because if I get him, I got to get Corey. And Corey's, I'll get to his prices in a moment. First, I got to dissect Jameson's prices. He was $50 for a selfie, whatever. I get it. The other Frog Brothers there, you charge a little higher than maybe you should. Although, I mean, in this day and age, 50 is probably the price he'd be regardless. So that was fine. But for his autograph price, he was plus 20 for an inscription or a quote, which I get it. That's becoming the norm. It's a little greedy, but okay. But he was plus 10 for character name. That, to me, if you're not someone like a Chris Evans or Robert Downey Jr., if you're charging for a character name, like, come on. I think
clearly he was doing it to generate tons of extra revenue, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, how do you think that went for him?
I mean, I was in that room for a decent chunk of time, and so we were discussing whether you were going to get Newlander, and I would say, and I'm not exaggerating, in the 15 or 20 minutes that we spent debating whether you were going to get him, not a single person gave him a nickel at his table. No, not a single
not
one.
At all. And I think you were approached more at this con than Jameson was.
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny. So I was wearing my marked out collectibles shirt because we did the Barbara Bain signing earlier in the day, and so I wore the shirt for that. And it's always funny to me. You get recognized in public generally from marked out and from the old days, and you were posting pictures on the board and reports on the board. I would get recognized much less frequently. So a couple people were like, yo, are you the guy from the podcast? And it happened like twice. Now, one time was someone who I can't remember his name, I introduced. And then the other time was just it was some stranger who I don't know, and I said, "You might know him, I don't." But he was like, "Oh, I love the podcast, can't wait to listen to it. Are you the guy who does it?" I'm like, "Yeah," and I started laughing because I don't know who this person is, and stupidly I didn't ask him his name. So if it was you, I would like to know. Because that was kind of fun. It was kind of cool. If you're actually a stranger who I've never met before, that's kind of cool too. Or if maybe you're a board member who I don't remember because we've all gotten older over the years. I don't know. I don't know. But it was very interesting to be spotted in person, and I was just not expecting it. It caught me by surprise.
Yes. Before I finish on Corey, just to touch on that, the gentleman you met first was Jeff Seltzer.
There you go. Yeah, that's right.
Jeff Seltzer.
Has done. I don't know how I haven't met Jeff in the past. It's just we haven't crossed paths, I guess.
At some point, I got to cover on this podcast. I got to cover the time I loaded my wife into my SUV and we went to New Jersey, and I did a deal with Jeff Seltzer where I ended up filling my car with wrestling merchandise, legit filling seat down to the ceiling. I couldn't even see out the back window, but that's for another story.
She must have been thrilled, not regretting her life choices at all.
Oh yeah. But anyway, to the guy that recognized you, that's, like at first we were, we had the board, then, we segued to the collectibles. And when you wanted to do this podcast, I'm going to make this very, very quick. I honestly, I was, I didn't want to do it. I was hesitant, but to actually be, have someone say, "Oh, you're the guy from the podcast," like, that's awesome. That means a lot. Like, this is a lot of fun. And if this shows that, if the people listening have half the fun we have listening that we have recording it, that's just awesome. Thanks for being on the ride with us. It means a lot. Yeah, that's awesome. But thanks. Back to Corey Feldman. So Corey Feldman came back in the room. I said to you that we were joking about this. I had said, unless Corey drops dead right now, he's not leaving this room before I get him. So I will get Jameson, because even if Corey died, I still would want Jameson. So I got Jameson. He was nice. His pricing was absurd, but he was nice. I can't bash my interaction. He was cool. So I got him, selfie only, got back on the line. We went through, you tagged out at this point. I think you went out. You ended up finding Greg from the
I intended to go to the vendor room, and I made it about 30 feet before I ran into Greg from Marked Out, and we ended up guessing the rest of the show.
So anyway, I'm going through the line. Corey Feldman's weird. Like, I don't try to bash people, although I usually bash people every day on this show. I already bashed the guy with the Mickey Rourke tattoo. So, I mean, why not bash Corey Feldman? He was weird. His girlfriend was like running the front end of the line with like Post-it notes. There was some like personalization he couldn't make out on the Post-it note. He like yelled at her and yelled at the guy next to him how these should have the name on the sticker, even though the guy was right in front of him, and he could have just been like, "Hey, bro, what's your name?" Like, I can't make this out. That would have been a lot easier, a lot less condescending. But I guess if you're Corey Feldman, you don't really have to worry about being condescending. But in any regard, then the next guy that got up to him had an autograph. Apparently, Corey had a 4-word limit on quotes, I guess, and he had a quote that is apparently originally 5 words. So this guy kind of redacted it a little bit, tweaked it to make it work at 4 words. So Corey was all like, "That's not the quote. It doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. It's got to be like this." And I'm standing there like watching. I'm thinking to myself, like, why don't you just write the 5th word then if it's so important to you? And he didn't. He instead came up with another quote, which I'm hoping is actually a line from the movie and not just something he created on the spot. The fan was happy with it, which, I mean, I guess that's all that matters. He did the quote that he came up with, did his thing. One guy in front of me just talked his ear off about music, which is, I think, exactly, if you want to get this guy's attention, tell him you saw him in concert. That's what he cares about. So he was happy with that. And then when I got up to him, the fascinating thing was the selfie was supposed to be $80. So I had my 250s in my hand the guy that's collecting the money my Post-it note. I'm standing there. Everyone else in front of me, they gave him the Post-it note. He would then say the price that was owed. You would pay him. It's a pretty, it's like a tale as old as time. And I'm standing there. He's talking to Corey Feldman. Nothing ever happens. So I'm still standing there, money in my hand. As this goes on, the money starts getting smaller in my hand. I kind of use my thumb to like push it back into my palm a little deeper. And I'm being very cautious because I'm not trying to swindle anyone. I'm just standing there. And finally, the handler's like, all right, go sit down, take your photo. So I'm like, okay. I open my phone, hand it to the guy taking photos, casually slip my hand inside my pocket where I disperse the 250s back where they belong, sit next to Corey Feldman. I take my photo. I then gather my crap after the photo. I run out of that room. That's largely why I didn't end up getting the guy from the Turtles, and now I'm blanking on his name, that I said I was thinking about getting. I figured, let me get out of the room before they remember they didn't charge me. But yes, they didn't charge me. For the first time in the history, we've heard of switcheroos, we've heard of splits, but this was, I don't even know what you'd call it. This was a charitable omission, I guess, at the table. So
There
I
you go.
did not pay for Corey Feldman's photo up. I mean, hopefully I don't end up in handcuffs at the next show now that I'm confessing to this great heist, but it happened. I did it. So yeah, that was Corey Feldman.
And so the only other thing we did was John Cusack, professional photo op. We split that one. There's not really much to tell other than they had little circles on the ground for you to stand, and the spot where we were standing was just the strangest spot. It was like
it was
the way he
bizarre.
did it was really, he would stand. John Cusack would stand behind you while you stood in front of him, and he's a lot taller than I thought he was, so maybe that's why he does it that way. It was very weird. But it was quick, and he was fine. He was polite, and it was no big deal. At the end of the day, it was one of those things where it was weird for a second, and you move on. And then the company that does the photo ops at Chiller is called Fandom. And the one at NYCC is Epic, and there's all these different companies, but Fandom kind of has a quirky way for you to get the digital version of your photo op. They give you a little, like a business card on it with a sticker, and that sticker has a unique coupon code, and you have to go on their website and like purchase your photo op using their coupon code, which makes it free, but it's only free because you already paid for it. It's this very weird setup that they have. At the end of the day, it costs like an extra hoop or two to be jumped through, but it was no big deal. At the end, we got our photo op. It looks fine, and that's the end of that.
Yeah, honestly, real quick, just my 2 cents on it. I'll probably be a snob here. I don't know. I first world problems. I wasn't a huge fan of it. Like, I don't really understand why I bought the JPEG at the table when I probably could have done it through the website. Like, there was just things like that were like, the ticket they give you is just like a highlighted, like, I don't know. I wasn't thrilled with the whole process, but it turned out great. I would 100% do it again. I'm just spoiled by Epic that it's just, it all just is automated. It comes right into your pocket. It's great. But again, first world problems, no complaints besides the complaint I just made. Also, not the one thing that you're forgetting, I did Alan Howarth, however you pronounce it, the composer. He did a bunch of things, but for me, Halloween. I love Halloween. He collaborated with Carpenter on Halloween 2, did Halloween 3, did Halloween 4, Halloween 5. I brought 4 items. I was steadfast. I'm going to get 2. And at first the sign was sort of misleading. I wasn't sure. It said, you and I were trying to figure out what it exactly meant. It said autographs for $40. It said Funko Pops signed for $80. I wasn't sure if that meant theirs, which I didn't see any on the table to sell, or if it meant that yours were $80 as a premium price. And I asked his handler, who was bizarre. Like, I was speaking to her. It was one of those things where I thought maybe I was like a ghost, because like I'm talking to her and like she's barely acknowledging my question. She's like a low talker and wasn't making eye contact. And I ended up looking at Alan. I'm like, is it 40 or is it 80? And he's like, it's 40. And I said, all right. So I got the jumbo Michael Myers Funko signed, which up until now I had just Carpenter and Dick Warlock on it. But now getting Alan on it, this means I got to get Danielle Harris. Because, I mean, listen, Jamie is big. I need Jamie. So I'll get Jamie on it. I'll get Nick Castle on it. I'll probably get James Jude Courtney on it if those two ever come around here again. So I did that. I did my 3 prints. I did my print for 2, 4, and 5 of Halloween. So the money I saved on Feldman, I just donated to Howarth on my insanity for Halloween. But all was well, all was smooth, and we were out of the show an hour earlier than we expected when I was going to do a Corey Feldman pro op. So I consider that a win.
Yeah, and so at the end of the day, that was that. And we did all right, and then we we got on the road, and another chiller theater in the books.
Yes.
So if you liked anything you heard today, if you are interested in our channel at all, if you are interested in cons at all, we ask you please subscribe on one of the services we're on. So we're on YouTube, Apple Podcast, and Spotify, and they all have subscription options. Or you can subscribe on Substack as well. So figure out a spot where you want to subscribe and make sure you subscribe there. And then if you're on Apple Podcast or Spotify, if you could leave a rating on either or a review on Apple Podcast, or if you could also leave comments on YouTube, any kind of engagement with our stuff goes a long way to helping us in the algorithm, and we appreciate it. And the content and the comments that we've been getting recently have been a lot of fun to engage with as well. So we got a couple things coming up in the near future. Next week, we're going to Rhode Island Comic-Con. We were negotiating a little bit whether it was going to be a 1-day or a 2-day affair, but I think we came to the determination that we can do it in 1 day.
Yeah. I as much as I love stealing crappy hotel towels, I mean, I'm always happy to knock it down to 1 day and just avoid that.
So we're going to Rhode Island on Saturday, and it's the following weekend or the weekend after. It's the following weekend is Oaks, Monster Mania Oaks, PA, and we're really going there. That's a ridiculously stacked lineup with Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis and Art the Clown. That's a cool show. Monster Mania always puts on Rhode Island Comic Con is always a great show. Monster Mania is always a great show. These are great cons coming up, and then and then hopefully I take a break for a while. You have another smaller show after that too, but
the week after Oaks, I will be going to the Westchester Tattoo Con with Brian Sokol from Golden Ring Collectibles, and I may or may not be getting a Marked Out Radio face tattoo.
Yeah, this hopefully lots of like a multicolored face tattoo. I think it'll be great.
Definitely.
You really do it. So once again, if you're shopping for autographs, check out www.markedoutcollectibles.com. Check out our eBay store at Marked Out Collectibles. To contact us for any reason, email markedoutcollectibles@gmail.com or join the Marked Out Collectibles official marketplace on Facebook. The only private signing we have coming up is Paul Heyman, WWE Hall of Famer. And all items and orders for Paul Heyman are due November 7th. We actually just got a couple more orders last day or two. So those keep coming in, and we're excited to do all that.
Absolutely.
So that ends this episode. I think next time around we'll be talking about Rhode Island, right?
Yeah.
And so we have a bunch of Rhode Island's going to be a cool show. I'm looking forward to the American Pie reunion. I'm a huge American Pie fan, for better or for worse. That's a big thing for me. So I'm looking forward to that and whatever else Rhode Island brings. And, anytime we go on a road trip like that, it lends itself to some good stories.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Rhode Island for me, not to go deep into it, but it's not the most stacked show, but I got a couple Hasbros to get done. There's some cool celebrities. We'll get into it next week. And in the next couple of weeks, I believe we're trying to hammer down a guest.
Yeah, we have a couple of guests.
Yeah.
We have a couple of guests in the pipeline. Some con promoters, also some infamous fans who are out there who want to have the chance to tell their story. So we're looking forward to that in the upcoming weeks as well. So for markedout.com, Marked Out Collectibles, and Marked Out Radio, I'm Sean.
I'm Dana.
And we will see you next week after Rhode Island.